Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG, and you might know me from my award-winning autobiography, John Denver. Trust me, I know where I'm going. But I also do full, detailed game reviews that aren't full of sponsored bullcrap. And what's on the agenda for today? Well, that is the happiness, good-feeling Metroidvania game known as Sundered, which basically asks a question: what would the world be like if Cthulhu mated with the Prince of Persia, and then the baby asked Charlie Sheen to make some levels for it to run around in? Now, Sundered is out July 28th on the PS4 and PC and goes for the suggested retail amount of around $19.99, minus all the various pre-order deals that have been glued to it to get you to jump on it, sight unseen. Let's see how it did, shall we? As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Sundered. Oh look, pipes, countdown to Dark Souls comparisons, and the H.P. Lovecraft version of Monster Closets. Graphics are up first. You know, a thought that resonated through my mind as I played this game: this is hit and miss a lot. First, I think, in many ways, Sundered is actually no slouch with this unique look to its animation and world style that looks a little bit like H.P. Lovecraft decided to paint worlds using black felt markers, and has a style that's somewhere around that Retroscope Lord of the Rings cartoon and Pyre mixed together, with this heavy hand on the color and delivering a worldview where almost nothing is in a straight line, and the things that are infected by enemies, both flora and fauna, that aren't. And there's some excellent attention to detail, like the strange stutter step stop of the main character as they reverse directions, or freeze to look around a new room, and that's excellent stuff. Attacking is also pretty well done, with typical directional attacks and an overabundance of color and flash when entering pointed negotiations with the game's bad guys. I love little elements like the fact that when you attack a platform below you, you don't actually use your sword, but instead basically use your feet that become a blade, or when you fire off even the unupgraded cannon and it flings you across a level with its recoil. These are really bigger-than-life representations of force, where I think Sundered nails it, and really harkens back to the devs' excellent work in Yoden. Then we get to the bad guys, who, at least to me, are both a delight and absolutely a letdown all at the same time. Some of them practically leak atmosphere, like the cultist with its weird upright shambling movement, or the crawler in its mouth of 1,000 nightmares leaping attack, and yes, at times even the meteoroid, but that's simply because the spool-up animation on that thing is so damned amazing when these little jets fire starts sputtering to life. It's incredible work there. But then you have the arena, or aranya, or amoeba, as I like to call it, which is basically a dog toenail someone glued googly eyes to, or the mechanized hunter, which basically looks like someone stopped working on the design a quarter way through it and said, you know what, let's just give him no arms and glue the friggin' gun to his neck and give it like 4 frames of animation. They don't even look like they're in the same game. They don't look complete and certainly don't have near the fleshed out feel of their brethren. And strangely, the world itself has some serious issues. Does it look bad? No. In fact, each of the 3 basic sections, and even the last section, or battle arena, has a distinct look to it with a color scheme that sort of fades in when going from section to section. That is actually really cool. But due to the platforming nature of the game, it's also cut up like a kid's art project, and that's when things start to fall apart, because it's hard to be organic and by the numbers at the exact same time. It is also mind-numbingly repetitive. Each time you die, and I'll get to that in a second, you're basically returned to your home shrine to start it all over again, and in doing so, you encounter the game's randomized level design, where the non-main sections are replaced each time you play with a puzzle piece style room set in between it. Now, this gets noticed very fast, and the dreaded proctology gameplay becomes the norm, where this mysteriously nasty plumbing looks just like the one I squeezed through a second ago, and looks pretty much like the one I'm heading to. Within even a few deaths, the repetitive nature and the strange cutout design of some of the elements, like the stairs that go up only to then go back down on the exact same level, like they're just basically sort of a ramp, become all too frequent. Luckily, the game runs spectacularly well, and 4K at 60 on the current gen of cards is going to be easy, and anyone with a 960 or above is going to be able to basically max this thing out without any real undue pressure. It works very well. As a package, Listen Sundered is incredibly impressive to look at, but the absolute repetition in its level design, plus some of the odd issues with its monster design, becomes a sore point far before you end up moving to any new locations or experiencing any new bad guys. Sound, music, and voice. And of course, in the audio category, sound comes up first. This is good. From it's not a lightsaber, but really it's a lightsaber sound coming from the main attacks to the absolute anarchy of a monster mash when 30 or 40 enemies swamp the screen. The surround sound and the placement is done with an eye towards really helping the player understand what's going on when the going, frankly, gets pretty damned insane. And for the most part, I'd say they hit it. And there is a lot of little details here, like the sound of your feet crinkling up the mesh of a steel floor, and most movement is tied to various different sounding locations so that it never gets mind-numbing even if you're traipsing to the right for 10 rooms without an enemy. Some good stuff overall. Music. You know, I would say this is actually good, but there is not a lot here, and for the most part ambient and moody. The music in Sundered takes a back seat to the sound work, which I would say is a boon to the player for sure, even if it's a bit noticeable from time to time as a stark feeling of nothingness while you're playing. Overall, it's a nice mixture of swells and stingers that pop up for important moments, and this happens in the game at various different times. And I like the fact that this is more of a this is important kind of soundtrack versus this is, well, yeah, it's just a room kind of soundtrack. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't have some outstanding moments. The thick, door-rattling Hell's Bells track that plays in a certain encounter is absolutely perfect for the location. As a package, I'd say it's pretty good, but it may fly under the radar for some people, and I can certainly see some folks wanting a little more. And of course, that always brings us to voice. You know, this is mainly a narrator that sounds like an extra from Hellboy, and they have a made-up language, and in this world, it sounds just guttural enough to really sink in. And unlike some games, for the most part, it actually sounds like a real language is being spoken versus the typical wah-wah-wah of the Peanuts gang teacher kind of voiceover work that we get sometimes when people make up a language in a game. There isn't a ton, but what is here is pretty good, and there's a lot of processing to make it feel just alien enough. Gameplay. And of course, a bit about the story. So you play as someone named Esh, a wanderer who gets stuck in a consistently changing H.P. Lovecraft-inspired dungeon complex. Hilariously shitty situation notwithstanding, the game is a platformer where you jump, double jump, slash, slam, tumble, shoot, grapple, and gravity defy your way through it, defeating elder gods, inspired bad guys to collect magic shards that you can then destroy for a ton of points to spend on your own skills or take them on as your own and basically influence the skills you already have, making them evil or more evil or eviler, basically just becoming the beast that hunts the beast. Now, as you progress through the game's main 3 regions, you face off against a series of bad guys, environmental hazards like smashing pistons and lasers, and mini and full-on region bosses. You're going to find particular abilities laying around in specific areas, some requiring their own set of skills to even get to that room. Now, each region has a fair number of secrets and abilities to unlock, like damage you do healing your shields, additional weapons like grappling weapons, the ability to air dash, and of course the world's largest shoulder cannon, as I've spoke about before. But for me, the problem with this game starts when I pretty much engage anybody in combat. Instead of that dexterity, delightful feeling you get when you use skill combined with memory to unleash hell on a game's enemies, much of that is removed here in Sundered, resulting in bone-breaking contests, where your protagonist wades into a bevy of enemies, and even with high skill levels, it sort of hinges a great deal on the stats, thus you dying, and so it begins again. And this is an actual design element that they put into the game, because, well, graphically, there are little tells to inform you of getting hit. Your main way to dodge is a roll that sends you flying across the screen, and because the game might lodge 20 to 30 to 40 enemies at you at any one time, the chances of rolling from one group right into another are very high. And that is without what has to be one of the weirdest spawning systems I've seen, taking you by surprise, relentlessly. First of all, killing the enemies is fun, and when you get better at it, you will notice it. But again, make no mistake, a bigger element will be the 400 times you buy health upgrades back at your temple, which I'll break down in a second. And the game's weapon and attack systems, even with the later abilities you get, is not very robust in its movement set. Though I do love the fact that hitting an enemy resets your ability to jump, so jump slashing enemies and using them like stepping stones can be done to get to some unique places. That was actually fantastic work right there. And of course, what is a game about death and resurrection without its skill list? See all those skills? See that massive skill list right there? It's actually not. You see, what is really there is a couple skills mired neck friggin' deep in many repetitive bonuses, like plus 10 to health. Nothing feels better than spending 12 hours in a game to buy a +1 to your armor. I'm not sure what they were thinking or why this is actually put up in this way, but man, the fact that not only is it a lot of repetition in the purchases, but the fact that you actually can't see all the way out into all the different skill areas to even know where you're headed was really poor design. And that sort of all feeds back into the second element of this game, which is death. You see, Sundered hinges on it. With each death, your patent-pending, procedurally generated room designer says, fuck it, and builds another set of rooms where the old ones were, like a goddamn Winchester mystery house. Luckily, the major locations stay, but the way to get them can alter as can the room's makeup. Or so you would think, or so you were told. But really, depending on the locations, what really happens is a doorway to somewhere else, or a series of pipes is above you rather than beside you. And you have to go down a tunnel versus maybe up. And this is repeated again and again and again and again. You get the idea. While its control, I admit, is somewhat spot on, the game has two elements in its movement system that is just really odd. First, double jumping, which requires you to press towards the wall on your jump and then flick to whatever location or direction you want to go to once you're done, which would be fine, but the game's collision detection for walls combined with this soft art direction in places can result in absolutely infuriating moments when your brain says, okay, I'm touching the wall, and the game says, nope, and you drop back down. Add to that the oddity of the main character sliding forward on the world's first pair of friggin' sand roller skates each time they attack, and you have a very peculiar feel to the game. That movement doesn't add difficulty to the game, mind you. It just looks weird, and its place is questionable at best. There's not a single time where I was playing this game and I was like, man, this is a good idea, and it makes the game harder or makes me pay more attention. Instead, it made the game just longer, because I might fall off a ledge, but the enemies can't seem to decide whether they want to tear me open and have a piñata party with my spleen, or if they just want to stay like 5 feet away, rambling around like they're trying to find the starting point for a blind taste test. Add to that random spawning enemies who can spawn in the room you just left, but some of them have weapons that shoot through the entire level. That means backtracking 3 to 4 rooms to kill a robot because he just randomly spawned where you just passed through and he continually shoots you. Add to that this complex system of enemy generation, which apparently takes the local temperature and a random page from the friggin' Farmer's Almanac to decide when it's putting enemies into the game. It just absolutely doesn't care if it makes any sense. There is no rhyme or reason here. Sometimes enemies will be spawned behind walls you can't get through, and they have those friggin' lasers that shoot almost the entire level, resulting in some unfun times. Or in that same level, sometimes the enemies will be spawned there and they just rub up against the door that can't be opened, like you're interrupting their midnight search on questionable hub websites, and you just kill them relentlessly. Lastly, I have to say something about the loading, which feeds directly into their style of gameplay. Any game that hinges on death that makes it one of its cyclic devices needs to figure out its loading. And while never as long as your first load, when you die and realize that the way back to the room you want to go to is just going to be somewhat semi-random, it's doubly unfun to wait on the game to load to get you back to the main temple in the first place. Now, I'm sure right now you're thinking, this is all bad. It's not. You see, much as Sundered is balls to the walls, and while it lacks the fidelity and certainly at times the fluidity of games in this genre, or many others, it can be awe-inspiring to somehow live through 40 enemy bloodbaths by luck, speed, memory, and firmly placing desert sandal to squishy, wormy ass and applying some heavy pressure. It's also not a short game, around 15 hours for most people. Fun factor. I admit it, I adored the exploration and finding a location, watching that color filter dropping into another bad LSD trip location was awesome too. The problem is the game's systems work against it. First, if there was an emoji for unfun grinding, it would be a picture of my face playing this game. Die to go back and buy a series of plus 10 levels to your health so that you can then, after about 20 purchases, buy a skill that adds a plus 1 to your critical hit, which doesn't actually mean that much because they don't really do their best to explain what critical hits are in the game. Explore the same terrain, but change just enough that it feels like early onset Alzheimer's and you can't remember which drawer your keys are in. No. It's not terrible, though. Sundered's taken sort of a niche of a niche of a niche and added a niche. And at one point it says death is only the beginning, but I think that some gamers are going to go, man, I sort of wish it wasn't. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale, with rent being replaced with deep, deep sale for any PC title. This is actually a wait for a deep, deep sale or rent. I admit it's got good ideas, but they are mired down in mind-numbing repetition, a very boring skill system, and some really odd hit-and-miss design across the board. You know, I expect some people to absolutely adore this title, and I get that, but a game built around repetition has to have a reason. I mean, fuck, even Bill Murray escaped Groundhog Day. It doesn't mean it's bad, and it doesn't mean they didn't try. It just means, for me, it didn't work out. So anyway, that's it for me. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. Remember to check out Twitter, Patreon, spread the word on Reddit. That's the way to keep this channel going and allow me to give you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.